To these people that are just flooding in.
Let,
Awesome.
let's get cracking. Yeah, I'm getting distracted by looking at all the engagement here. This is really great. But everyone, welcome. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see all of you here. So thanks for choosing to spend your time with us today. Now, before we get started, I'm just going to say a few words, some housekeeping items, and a little bit about where I'm from. So, Kevin, do you want to move it over to the next slide for me, please? Um, okay, I was actually looking for the housekeeping slide. Oh, go back like two more. Oh, nah. Anyway, I can speak to it. So, welcome. So, just a few housekeeping items. Everyone is automatically muted. So no worries if there's any background noise, anything like that. We're not going to be able to hear it. So you're all good there. I will also be sending you guys a recording of this session, so please keep your eyes on your inbox for that one. This is available online, but also by phone. So if you get disconnected for any reason, have a look at your email inbox and you can call in that way. We have the Q&A function that you can use to ask questions. That'll help us make sure that we address all the questions, but we also have the chat open for any dialogue that we'd like to have. And Kevin, if you can move it to the next slide. And just a little bit about us, Amelia. We are a parks and recreation management platform. Basically, we make your lives easier on the back end by helping you organize and run your programs and initiatives, while at the same time making it easier for your residents to engage with you, find you, and sign up for your activities and programs. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about you guys and how we can leverage data and community insight to evolve and transform the programs that you have. So if you like this type of content, Kevin, if you can move to the next slide, please. Check us out at amelia.com/library. We have a ton of stuff that is put together specifically for you. Past webinars, guides, white papers. So please do go check it out when you've got a chance. And with that, Chris, I'll move it over to you and I'll be listening and I'll rejoin you at the end of the call.
Yeah, I am so excited. We're up to 252 people, and I know that's not for me. It's for quote unquote the man, the myth, the legend, Kevin Schmidt. He is from, I don't even want to say how do you even say the district's name, but district out in the Salt Lake area. And it is just amazing that I've got to know Kevin over the last few years. He was at director school. That's an NRPA school, and I know a lot of people who are in the chat have gone to director school, so I appreciate that. So it's a really good resource for that. But as I started looking at kind of just making sure we got good representation across the country with different ideas and different thoughts about how to do this thing called Parks and Recreation, Kevin, I actually went to his facility a couple of years ago and just was really, really impressed by the stuff he was doing. And so we were talking about concepts, and he came up with this thing called Recreation Reimagined. And really, it was just like, this is exactly what we need to do, refocus of really the how to, make these things happen, the pros and cons and the challenges, and really more the opportunities of what exist. And so it really gives me great pleasure to introduce Kevin. And Kevin, let's take this away.
Thanks so much, Chris. First off, I want to wish all the fellow Hispanic park and recreation professionals a happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm originally from Colonial Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. I don't look like it, but I am. And I've had the opportunity to interact with Chris a little bit and have really enjoyed his mentorship and the things that he teaches, like many of you that have jumped on today. So the district that I'm the director of is the Oquirrh, that's how you say it, Chris, Oquirrh Recreation and Parks District. And we're a small district in the Salt Lake area. So I thought we could start off to continue some interaction with a little guessing game. So Chris, if you'll kind of watch the chat, and let's see who gets this first. So I'm going to describe something, You go in this store, and there's the smell of popcorn. You're greeted by candy, red vines, and um,
We got movie theaters, we got Ace Hardware, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Whoever put Ace Hardware, they Cat Morris, they used to sell, give free popcorn to when you're going buy tools and that type of stuff.
yes. Um, anyway, then you walk up and down the aisles, and usually if you wanted to be guaranteed to get the item, you went on a Thursday, because if you waited too late on a Friday, you probably were not going to get it. Someone else grabbed it before you, or a Saturday. And then you better make sure, after you rent this item, to rewind it, because they were not very friendly when you did not rewind it. And if you were late, it was a hefty late fee.
Oh, you mean Be Kind Rewind? Oh, there it is. Jordana just said that too. Be Kind Rewind. I remember those stickers there. Oh, Blockbuster. Yeah.
Yes, Blockbuster. So we're going to do another one. It's along the same line, so you'll probably get it faster. This one was a little bit different because you were anxiously awaiting either a white or a red envelope in your mailbox.
They
That was too
already know
easy.
this, man. They're already blowing this things up. Netflix, Redbox, and all that type of stuff.
That was too easy.
Yeah, no
So,
kidding.
so Netflix was a little bit different than Blockbuster, right? Where they started to give you the opportunity to just have it delivered straight to your house, and you didn't have to go and fight the crowd, hoping that you'd get the item. You'd rent it, and they would send it to you, and you didn't have to return it as fast. Of course, this was the DVD days, and so you didn't have to worry about rewinding it. So Netflix was innovative in that way. Um, so one more. Oh, I see the Columbia record CDs. Yeah,
Oh,
that was a
I
good.
trust me, I have used that stuff. And you know what, Kevin, we were talking about the generations aspect in our pre-show, and we're going to use a term here that nobody's going to know. And I think there might be some people who are just have no clue of what Columbia CDs for 1 cent was, which, probably got half my collection on from that standpoint.
Yeah, I got quite a few collections. All right, the next one, you started going to a gas station or to McDonald's or to a grocery store, and same thing as Blockbuster, but you would go somewhere much closer. Very good. Redbox.
Redbox.
Now, I bring these up because a couple of them no longer are things you can do. They're gone. Netflix, though, has turned into one of the most powerful streaming options that exists, and now we're just kind of overwhelmed by so many streaming options that exist. And I even saw a meme earlier that said, I had to cancel my Netflix subscription because it takes longer to find something to watch on Netflix than to walk the halls of a Blockbuster, just because there's so many options out there to entertain us now. Go for it, Chris.
Where I also see this too as part of the discussion, kind of relating this back to recreation is, really, I'm going to put this in the chat here. What are some of the key points of the evolution of these services? Of, hey, listen, there may be, changes in our society, changes in our program, changes in our areas that are impacting this because new technologies came out and now we have to adapt them. And so, the same program that we had or facility that we had maybe 25 years ago may or may not be meeting the needs of today. And when we start looking at the financial, all that type of stuff, it's just amazing of what, yeah, we're not Blockbuster, yeah, we're not Netflix, but we can use some of those same principles of modification of the life cycle of your programs and services.
Yeah. Well, and interesting enough, those the kind of understand the history of Blockbuster, they actually were approached by Netflix to buy into the Netflix company and have a 49% ownership for $50 million. And they laughed Netflix out of the office. Netflix has over 300 million subscribers and is worth like $521 billion now. So Netflix was doing something right and Blockbuster did something wrong. Now, Chris, earlier you shared a phrase with me. Why don't you tell the group that phrase?
Sure, and there's some Generation Xers here. Somebody said my Gen X is showing. Jordana Freeman, who said that, and we were talking about it, saying, "Hey, listen, we've got to realize, or maybe I'll just throw it out verbally here is." See how many people get this. When I talk about, or when we talk about something jumping the shark, what does that mean? Or our programs and our services may have jumped the shark mean? And I already got one here. Okay, and picked up right, and what does it really mean? From a what is jumping the shark down? Okay, Terry just said on the way down, past relevance, when it runs out of ideas, when it runs out of creativity. Aaron, great job. Last ditch effort to revive it. That we've got these programs to some extent that may be on life support. We're just throwing stuff out without really doing what Kevin's going to talk about here is a critical analysis of the program, of the why we should change, the how we should change, the purpose of the change. When all of a sudden we'll get into, I think the first area is maybe our community is changing, but we're still doing a program from 25 years ago that served the need from 25 years ago. Kevin?
Yeah, perfect. So I love that kind of phrase because that's exactly what we're talking about. And all of us are familiar with maybe a TV show that just went on too long, and had it just ended at season 6 instead of season 9, it would have been perfect, right? So, and like Chris said, we're going to want you to be thinking of what are some programs or events or facilities or even processes that we do that may be following Blockbuster's way of doing business and not Netflix. So I'm going to start with something that we're all very familiar with, the recreation lifespan. And we can use this for programs or events or facilities, et cetera. But you have the introduction phase where the program's launched and it grows to maturity, where you've got peak participation and interest is really high. And then for some programs, all of a sudden you start to see a decline. And you notice that the participation's not there, or maybe what you were doing maybe had a fad aspect to it, and you're just no longer meeting the needs or the goals of the original program. And then it comes time to evaluate and make an adjustment. And in the adjustment phase, we can call them the 3 R's. You can remain, so you can keep doing what you're doing. You can reinvent, so rebrand, reimagine what you're doing. I like to think of this as sometimes you just need to make some tweaks, right? And then the last one is to rest in peace, reallocate, make that program or facility or event stop, and use the funding in a better way that has a better, greater impact to our residents.
Yeah, and Kevin, I'll go there too. It's the most challenging thing to cut a program. It really is, because there's that small member group that is just passionate about this, but you've got to be able to do what's quote unquote in the best interest of the department. Look at your metrics, and Kevin's going to be talking a lot about metrics of the data sources that you look to justify the decision. I remember I talked to a group in Colorado, and we were looking at their programs and their cost aspect and all that type of stuff, and said to ourselves, "Hey, listen, we have literally a 50-person 5K race, and it's actually costing us over revenue $9,000. And so you're spending $9,000 for 50 people. What else could you do with that money? Is promoting wellness for 50 people important to that community? Absolutely. But are there different ways that we could do that in a more cost-effective manner? And that's really what Kevin is really trying to throw out. But I did throw out here is this kind of work with us as we're talking about what Kevin's doing in Utah. Do you have any programs that are currently in decline? Why are they in decline? And we can kind of blend some of that discussion in too. So Kevin?
Cool. So I'm going to start by sharing a program that existed here in this district. And some of the examples that I'm going to share are from previous places or other agencies. But the first two are from my agency here. So there was a large event called Fire, Water, and Ice. The event had existed for over 20 years. COVID for 2 years made that event not happen. And I think that's a valid thing to look at. COVID was a good opportunity to kind of look at some of these things and maybe change the way we were doing business, right? We could look at it as an opportunity or just as a terrible time, which it was also. But the event got to the point where we had the participation trends were declining. We got to the point where it was basically the same number of people as a regular Saturday at our pools. And to kind of give you an idea of our campus, we've got 6 pools, a rec center, an event center. We're right next door to the Utah Olympic Oval, which we own and then lease back to the Olympic Legacy Foundation. And they were a part of it. They were the ice component. But when you're putting up stages and you're hiring entertainment and all of those extra things, to have the same participation numbers as a normal Saturday is quite discouraging. And the volunteer interest had ended. And so now we were having to make more of our employees work this event. And of course, the impact on fire and police, et cetera. When we started doing some evaluation and getting some feedback, there was mixed community feedback. There were some people that loved it. We thought it was an event that our members loved, but I'll show you in our analysis, people were avoiding coming to the event because they didn't want the distraction. They just wanted to come use the rec center. Our partners, like the Olympic Oval, they were not seeing the participation numbers that made sense to them. So they no longer were interested. And the city itself had kind of conflicting events that they were trying to do in partnership with us, where they did a parade and a hometown night, but we basically were doing the same events back to back. And we were supporting their event, and then they weren't necessarily supporting our event except for with some monetary donations. And the sponsors had basically completely depleted. So we did a cost benefit analysis, and I'm grateful for our controller who is way into numbers. She got into the nitty gritty, and we wanted to really look at the true costs. Too often, I think we don't look at true costs of what an event or a program costs or a facility. And so things like lost revenue due to programs not happening on that Saturday, or we normally would open at 7 o'clock, but on this day we didn't open until noon. And we didn't have the weight room and the gymnasium open because it was such an emphasis on the outdoor pools. And so what's the impact to our members there? And then just the wages alone. And then we were having to set up for a week, and then we would tear down on Sunday, and we weren't opening the rec center on Sunday to be able to get everything put back in place. So and by no means do I want to say that, community events are supposed to generate all this money, right? Each of us have to decide where do community events lie on our cost recovery values. But for us, you can see in the right corner, this last year, the last year that we did it, we only had 4% of our members coming to the event, and we were subsidizing the event almost by $26 per person that attended. That's a lot of money. Yeah, Chris.
Kevin, I'm looking at this, and Irene is throwing some comments in there, and I do appreciate those comments about we're a cost center, we rely on sponsorships. But really, what I also see here in this is while you may be getting sponsorships and they're just writing the check, but there's no real, heavy lift to maintain that sponsorship. So yeah, you're getting the dollars, but there's this whole value proposition of, are we using the facilities in the best use way? Because you were saying that your saying point that you're taking up the facilities for 5 days. I just did a quick calculation of 6.3 hours times 253 employees. That's about 1,600 hours that you're spending on this program. That's almost a full F-time FTE. What could you do with a full-time FTE from this? And then the overall aspect is the fact of, while you may be financially able to support it in Irene's case, and I don't know exactly what Irene is, in what she's thinking about. We just see some limited text here, is you're still doing a lot of work for, and the yield may not be there in terms of, is this the best and wisest use? So something has to change is what we're trying to encourage you from, and you have the metrics here to do it. Now, one of the things that I really want to say to you, Kevin, is, at my level now as quote unquote an assistant city manager here, I have to look through the political lens of, because these things become political, because I've been going to that fire, water, and ice for 25 years type of thing. How do you manage that aspect?
Well, that actually was a key component. Prior to my arrival here, I've been here about 4.5 years. There had been a financial analysis done, right? But politically, it was not in the best interest of the district to pull the plug.
Right.
And we just happened on a perfect storm where we currently reside used to be a township, and then they became a city. And so we went to the city and we had a meeting with the mayor and their events person and said, hey, now that you're a city, let's discuss what your roles are going to be and how we can support you in your efforts to have a city celebration. Because as a district, we don't just serve this city where this campus happens to be on. We actually serve 4 different cities. And so we were able to have a discussion with them, and they agreed that they were going to take on and expand their offerings, and that we would support them in their efforts. And so politically, that worked out for us, and financially.
Yeah, and let me go a little bit more into deeper. Is I love the fact that you have 2002, 2003, 2004. I think us as leaders of Parks and Recreation departments, we start seeing things, and we need to collect the data, and we need to tell people who we report to, hey, listen, we're looking at this because it just doesn't look right. And so you're planting the seeds, not for this year, but for multiple years to come, that there's probably something waning of this activity. And we're going to try to make this thing the best thing, but at some point, a decision that needs to be made. And that's something that we had to do with our couple of our events, larger race events, where costs just started to get really increased. We have a crawfish boil 5K, and all of a sudden we went from $0 related to health permits and that type of stuff for the food service to literally $5,000 to $7,000 a year for just permitting so we can actually cook the food and have this contest. And so we ended up canceling that event. Actually, we modified the event. We don't have the crawfish boil there. We actually have the crawfish boil now in another county, long story on that because we're split by multiple counties, but we had to reassess that type of thing. And Skylar made a really good point too, is that I want to kind of circle back with is for some of our larger events, we have a lot of volunteer time from our management staff. You know that, Kevin, as well as I. We've been there schlepping 12, 14, 16-hour days. There's no question about that. That's not often calculated. And so there is something that you need to do and figure out here is what is the wear and tear on staff. That if you're getting the good numbers, yeah, sure, it makes sense. But if you're seeing those declines, and the staff is still doing 2, 3, 4 days of setup that you guys can be doing for maintaining your parks, thinking of new programs, there may be a time at a time point and place to say, hey, we got to cut this, but we also have to recognize the political aspects.
Yeah. So, and everybody has to evaluate their own, right? This is just our situation. But we decided with the work of the board that we were going to just continue, but reallocate funding into programs that would be smaller and try to reach a different demographic. So many of you are putting in the chat, and I think that some of you are feeling like you're relating to what I'm talking about here. But some of the things that we did is we started looking at the demographics that we have here in our community, and we're unique in the Salt Lake Valley, where about 50% of our population is Hispanic. We've got a large Polynesian population in our district. And so as we started to evaluate what we were doing, we realized we're not really serving that population group, except for just saying, here's what we have to offer, and if you want to do it, do it. And so we started being more intentional in what we were doing. The best example that I'm really proud of is our Dia de los Muertos event that we did last year, because when that event happened, it was so many people coming to our facility that never had been to our facility before, and then coming up to us as staff and thanking us for doing something for them, and then even better, offering to help us with the next one and wanting to be involved. And that's what you want. You want to create that community involvement and excitement over things. So we're excited for the expansion of how we can reach the different demographics. We've done a whole bunch of different smaller events this year. And one of the benefits that we've seen is that we're reaching a broader audience. We feel like we're meeting the community needs. The goals that we established with these smaller events, we feel like we're reaching those. It's a better use of resources. For example, for the Dia de los Muertos event, we had maybe 4 employees working that event. Setup was a couple of hours, tear down was an hour. I mean, when you compare that to the number of hours that we were putting into Fire, Water, and Ice, it's very different. And sure, we didn't have the same number of people coming, and we weren't expecting the same number of people, but it definitely made a big difference. And something to keep in mind, we all have this little thing called weather that we have zero control over. And so, not to say that we're not doing outdoor events, but we're being maybe cautious on how many outdoor events we're doing, and the time of year that maybe doesn't make sense to do those outdoor events.
Right.
So
let me go to this, Kevin. We have a question here of how do you keep track of large event attendance? Is there anything that you do? I'll start with what we do here. One, we rely on our police officers, which is not the greatest way to do it, because most of our large events have multiple entrances where just people come from all angles there. What we've been flirting with right now is using a couple of quote unquote AI programs. I say that AI because everybody's saying everything is AI these days. but really using kind of cell phone data analysis, whether it be through some programs like Placer AI, City Data AI. There's some other folks there. Brandon just mentioned Placer AI. We're working with City Data AI, and I'm just trying to figure out the formulas of how they use it, because if I get X and that's only Y percentage of the cell phones, what does that really equate to the overall number that could be in our organizations? And Derek uses AI as well, and says city data. So there are some programs out there to use it versus saying, I think there's 8,000, I think there's 5,000, because we need that reliable data to make decisions, not just the guesses.
So I will say that Fire, Water, and Ice was a paid event. So they paid to come into the event. So that was easy for us to be able to track, right?
Awesome.
Other cities I've worked for, that was prior to Placer AI technology, but we would use, our GIS department would fly a drone over, take pictures, and we would use that to try to help us. We have these machines called Happy or Not that we would put at the entrances, and people could just hit a smiley face or a sad face or a in-between face. And that gave us kind of some data, but it also gave us a number of how many people were pushing that button. Is it perfect? Of course not.
And I'm going to go to Derek's comments, and he says he used Placer AI. One of the benefits of events, especially in various communities who rely on hotel tax, sales tax, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is really to be able to differentiate what is the purpose and role of this program. Is it for residents, or is it for people to attract? And so all of our programs are really, our special events in our community are really supposed to be for residents. However, we know we have a large percentage of non-residents using these programs. So we're trying to use this data to make sure, are we right sizing the program, and do residents feel comfortable coming, and do they know that is actually the majority residents or not? And so some things that we're working through. So Derek, thank you very much for your comments there.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm going to actually share that with one of the programs. That was one of their concerns. So this one is also at our district, and this is looking at a facility, so a little bit different than an event. But the facility was the reason the district was created, the swimming pool. And it's 59 years old. They started having issues and talking about needing to replace the pool 15 years ago. And consequently, kind of the board had stopped putting much into the building. Well, that just makes it continue to fail. And they had tried 2 different bond measures to replace it, and both of those had failed. So that gives you a little bit of context of what we were working with. We finally got to the point where there were some serious safety concerns with the facility, and we looked at what's the cost analysis to fix it or to build new. And we found, well, to build a new one in today's market was going to be around $26 million, which we've already got 5 other pools on this campus. So that's a lot of money to invest in another pool, and trying to figure out, is there something we can do with an existing asset to continue to serve the residents the way that they want to be served. So here's a few pictures. The first 2 pictures are some of the things that none of us could see necessarily. They're kind of hidden, but you can see the structure is crumbling, concrete's crumbling. The second picture is what I call rusted puff pastry that's holding the outside of the building to the beams. And once we got that quote unquote metal tested, they said that's not metal. You don't have any metal there. It's holding that together by, we're not sure what. So finally, the decision was made due to safety concerns to close the facility. And we honored that by having an event to let the public come and kind of say goodbye, and a lot of memories were shared. We gave out tons of trophies from, 60 years worth of swim meets and water polo games, and just probably hundreds of thousands of people had learned to swim in this pool. So there was a lot of sentimental reasons. And that's why it took 15 years, because along with that, it's the political game, right? The board was very concerned with closing it, and how's that going to affect the community, and how are they going to react to us. And so we came up with a plan to put an air supported structure over one of our existing outdoor pools that's the right depth. It's about 3 to 5 feet of water. So we can do swim lessons in there, we can do water fitness in there. Is it as good as the old pool? No, because it's got this weird shape to it. And is it going to be extra difficult to have to cover this pool seasonally and then we'll take it down for the summertime? Sure. But the cost to do this pool is something we could do without bonding. So we could afford to do it in-house and not have to go to bond. And then we're going to put some pickleball courts on top of where the existing pool is.
And Kevin, just for clarification, that you turned an existing pool into a bubble pool, and you're going to take the bubble off of during the summer months. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of throw out to you is the fact that, to sometimes make these decisions to move forward in a different direction, you can write all the reports you want. You can have the engineers write the reports, whatever it is. But sometimes you got to show decision makers and critical stakeholders that, yeah, you're making it look good on the surface, okay? But when you start going into the pump rooms, and we start going into some of the other ancillary areas of what is actually crumbling, some people are visual learners and can really understand that, as opposed to a written report. And just kind of a parallel situation where we had to reimagine kind of our park operations office. We've grown basically exponentially over the last 20 years, and we're putting 4 or 5 people in an office. You can tell your board of directors or your community stakeholders that, hey, listen, we're putting 4 or 5 people. But when you see at 7 a.m., which is our peak time period, of 150 people in an office building that is really only made for probably 75, the lights go on of the critical necessity of why we need to change from that standpoint.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we were sharing pictures, we were having professionals come and present to the board, voicing their concerns, and there was still a struggle to make that decision to pull the plug until we did a tour. And when we did a tour, those that were against it suddenly were on board pretty quick. So that's a very good point, Chris. So I saw a picture tells 1,000 words, but even in our case, the picture, even these scary pictures, were not scaring them enough until they came and they saw it in person. And then the last picture on the right is just an example of reusing a space, reimagining a space. We had a party room in the old pool, and we knew, okay, if we're going to lose that pool, we need a space. This was a hot tub in a hallway, because it was a body of water, we had to lifeguard it. And so that was the worst spot in the rotation to make a lifeguard sit there and stare at the hot tub. And it was an adult only hot tub. And so they got to see things they really did not want to see. But it was a good space to be able to turn into a party room, and we've been able to use it for some trainings and some other activities in there as well. Currently, I'm having to use it as a temporary office for some of the people that are being displaced from the original pool while we get their offices completed. But now we've got the space to be able to do that. So Quickly, I'll share this example about South Jordan. So South Jordan's also in the Salt Lake area, and they had a marathon that actually was doing very well. So this is an interesting analysis of their event was doing well. They had good participation. Um, they had sponsors that were growing, and so from the initial look at it, that's great. That's exactly what you want. Except for their goals, they started to realize were not being met. When they looked at who was actually signing up for the marathon, there weren't as many residents as they thought were going to be signing up. And because Salt Lake, it's just a bunch of cities that are kind of pushed together, people were coming from outside cities into South Jordan. They were doing the marathon and then they were driving and leaving, which actually was not benefiting the tourism dollars that they also thought that they were going to benefit from. And so when they did a cost analysis and they started looking at the number of people that it was costing and then the disruption to the residents with road closures and the need to use police and fire, they started to realize that maybe we need to change how we're doing things. So, like I said, they realized maybe this is not fulfilling our original purpose, and they decided to go in a different direction, and they invested money into expanding their 5K race series. And now they basically have a race every month, but instead of using the roads, they're focusing on trying to use the trail system. So now they're not having to close off the roads. The impact is much less. They're getting a lot more residents that are participating in this series, which is one of their main goals. And they're finding that they can do these for a lot less manpower than they were having to do with the marathon combined, right? So there's not that strain.
And I'll double down on that is, we this year we are discontinuing our triathlon. It was a very, very successful triathlon, 20 plus years. We're at our peak, we were at 1400. At our lowest, we were at 600. We were climbing back over the course of the last couple of years, and that has to do a lot with what we hear from our racing community is the generations of once the Generation X get a little bit older, they have bucket lists to do of, hey, listen, I'm going to do a triathlon or I'm going to do a marathon. So we see peaks and valleys in the use. But to your point, we were spending a ton of money on security and safety. I mean, it was like $50,000, $60,000 just in traffic control devices and police officers on this 10, 12 mile route that we said to ourselves, much like what Sojo did, hey, listen, is there a place that we can hold a series of 5Ks or maybe even nuanced race distances, 6 mile, five, whatever it might be, so you're a little bit unique in the market? But we're really successful with these 5Ks. We set up about 2 hours before, we tear down in about 30 minutes, 3 staff versus the entire department shutting down for a couple of days. And more importantly, for our residents who are hypersensitive about road closures, lane closures, if they can't get to their coffee shop in the same way that they've been doing for the last 20 years, they just go ballistic on those type of comments there from that standpoint. And so Nahil Baker said, what does your trail system look like? We have what we call a waterway. And so one of our main parks is right on the waterway, and then we loop to a couple of other parks. You have to understand how races work because you can only put so many people in a 10-foot, 12-foot wide pathway. So you've got to look at staggering and some interesting things from that standpoint to make sure that you also have a good positive running experience. But it's rethinking the narrative on what a race can be, should be from there to there. And Joanna said from an economic impact standpoint. And so to Kevin's comment, which was the original statement, the economic impact, if the race's goals are for residents, well, you're really not going to have economic impact because that's meant that ecological, okay? Okay, but I'll talk about the economic because that's what I'm more familiar with. The economic impact is the fact of, hey, listen, are we going to drive heads and beds with this race? And that was one of the things. We actually have a marathon in our community. We don't produce it, but we were originally giving money to support the economic impact of it. But we found out that nobody was coming from real distance and turning heads and beds. So we lessened and actually we reduced our impact. What Kevin is trying to say here in this whole narrative is, what are the goals of your event, and does the event still meet the goals, or is it just we're doing it to say that we're doing it from that standpoint? And so Becky says, and I'm just reading it as we say it, I haven't comprehended this. We have also had to make decisions about our half marathon, cost for police roads, impact for residents. We discontinue now, have a glow and go. I guess you stole that idea and that name from us, Becky. So by the way, that's trademarked, and you owe me some money from that.
I'm sure there's only two in the whole country.
And then Jordana, go back to the ecological standpoint, is just saying need to work with parks to make sure that you're being environmentally stewards. There's a lot of pros in that and that could be what materials you're using in your post-race parties. What are your awards? How are you encouraging to carpool? How are you encouraging to bike ride? There's a lot of those things. And Jordana just said it, not trampling plants. Makes complete sense. Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. So we're gonna end with one more quick example. This city was Harriman City. They're in the southwest corner of the Salt Lake Valley. Started as a very small community, and probably around 2017, they were the fastest growing fastest growing city in the country. And so a lot of young families were moving there. It was affordable. And they, at the time, had this small community carnival, like many of us are familiar with, that they were doing at a shelter in one of their parks, which is a very large shelter, by the way, that could hold like 800 people. So, but the event had kind of plateaued. It was not exciting anymore, and we had an opportunity. And I think this is one of the main points to look at in this example is we had a new park coming online that was a much better fit, a much more interesting. It was centralized to the city. And so we had the opportunity to move the event to a new park, a new location. And with that, we chose to rebrand the event. And so we called it now the Harriman How instead of Community Halloween Carnival, right? So catchy name. Our communications department was on board, did a lot of great stuff. This event went from about 250 to 350 people, literally to 5,000 people. And that was kind of frightening for us the first year, just because we were not ready for 5,000 people. But thankfully, with social media, we could kind of see how much interest there was in the event, and then kind of sort of plan what to expect to deal with the parking issues that we were going to have, work with the local schools and the other rec center that was across the street to allow people to park there. We involved community partners. So our staff was a staff of 5. There was no way that we could do all the games and all the activities for this. So we got businesses to do it for us. We created skeleton scenes, and they continue to do that to this day, where they basically have businesses and the local families sign up to create these skeleton scenes. And it's just turned into a really fun and exciting event that's different. Did it still have the same components of the original event? Sure. But another thing we would do is change some themes each year, so that, one year would have the Dia de los Muertos, and this picture is of the Harriman Yeti, their mascot. And the next year was alien themed, and he was dressed like Men in Black, or just so that the public kind of knows that when they come, there's going to be something new and different.
Exactly, Kevin. And I love that idea from a standpoint of we had a haunting, which was our special, which was our haunted trail type of thing. And we could have kept it haunting, 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 but people are going to say, okay, well, I've already been to the haunting and that type of stuff. And then if you go into kind of our archives, we would have the haunting, and it was titled Psychopath this year. I mean, one of my staff came up with that idea, brilliant idea. And every year it was a new name and a new name and a new name. So you got that experience. And Chad just said it real well. I think Chad is up from the Northeast, if I remember so, is doing this with our summer camps, making a lot of changes to improve the program and rebranding them with new names to cement the idea, new day, new camp. Again, is it the community Halloween program? I mean, that is the most boring thing in the world. And what are consumers, and I use that terminology a lot in my narrative of how I talk about things, is saying the consumers want unique experiences, fun experiences, engaging experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And so if we're producing the same old program, and if we're seeing the attendance drop, go figure, is because this is what this generation wants. And a couple other questions here is we branded our sports summer camps. We moved into new center, which increased enrollment. Okay, you're going to get that natural bounce because everybody wants to be in the new facility. But the comment that I'm going to make, Jamil, is what are you going to do in 5 years? How do you continue that effort to make it new and innovative? And Maggie says this: does this event have additional ways to create revenue, like chocolate sales, glow sticks? And I'll show you what we're doing right now. We're doing a holiday lights program. We've expanded it twice already. Actually, we expanded it once because we did it the first year last year. We expanded there, and we're adding those things again and trying to figure out how to adjust. It's a free program, how to address different revenue. But in about a year or two, there's just so many holiday lights you can put into it. So how do we get into that mindset of what are we going to change? And one of the things, actually, come to think about it, is we signed a contract with a lighting company that says thou shalt change out 10% of the lights every year. So there are new displays on a yearly basis. So there's something new instead of just, oh my Lord, we've taken our picture with Santa. It's the same Santa and the bulbs are blinking out and that type of stuff, that we work from that standpoint, from that standpoint. So, Kevin?
Well, and along with what now it's scrolled past and I can't see it. I think it was Maggie had asked about revenue opportunities. Charging for food trucks. We have vendor booths. Now I know they do a farmers market as a part of this, where they're selling little things. So and yes, sponsorships for sure. Currently, the hospital, it wants to be that sponsor, and they're paying like $5,000 to be the naming rights sponsor. So it's the Harriman Howe presented by Lone Peak Hospital or whatever, right? But then there's a whole bunch of other sponsorship opportunities after that.
And one of the things, Kevin, just to talk about sponsorships that we're doing, is because we're short on staff. We don't have the ability, and it's a specialty to actually sell sponsorships. One of the things that we're working on right now is actually developing an RFP to actually have a commissioned salesperson that wouldn't be a staff, but they raise $5,000 through a sponsorship, and they get to keep 10%, 15%, whatever that market rate is. Just thinking through another way to do it, because we know we need the money to pay for this stuff. Kevin, we got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, so if you're interested in seeing a video of this event, just go to YouTube and search Harriman Howe, and they've got several videos of recaps from different years. Because we don't have time to do that. Oh, I'm clicking and it's not clicking. All right, here we go.
Keep going.
And there we go. Okay, so just to kind of cap it off, now it's your turn to kind of look at your events, your programs, your facilities, and think, does this need to be evaluated? And really, we should be evaluating these things constantly, not when there's some drastic problem, because you can make small tweaks throughout. I mean, even yesterday we were meeting, talking about our concessions and vending, and kind of going through evaluating the price point and the different items that we're selling, and how can we change that to be more profitable to us to reach our cost recovery goals. Look at the life sand. Where's it at? If it needs some adjustment, look at the 3 R's and figure out, does it need to keep doing what it's doing? And many of your programs are going to be in that state. But some of them may need to just be reinvented, or even look at how you're getting your volunteers, or how you're doing your rules in some of your sports leagues. You can constantly be reevaluating and change things.
And I'll add too, I just threw in the whole thing of, remember, don't jump the shark, type of thing. Just put that on I've been saying a lot, put that on a little notepad on your desk to kind of refocus, to say, hey, listen, I've got to continually evaluate, continually to modify your program from there. But it's awesome information that we have here. And Eliza said, hey, is there a way to get a copy of the talk? So Kathy said that as well. There will be a link here, and John's going to come on from Amelia here any second to really give some more information and kind of wrapping it up. I'll put another plug in for Hispanic Heritage Month on behalf of Kevin. And really, there is a group who are of Hispanic Parks and Recreation professionals. Kevin is a part of that group, and I serve as their mentor. It's called the Hispanic Professionals of Parks and Recreation. And so I will shoot that link one more time. John, it's all up to you now.
All right, thanks, guys. That was fantastic. I really loved hearing about the examples that Kevin shared about reimagining your spaces and programs. I also really love the engagement. Penny, I saw a comment about how they changed their pool into a skate park. I thought that was awesome. But we are at the end of the hour. I know you guys all have busy lives. So thank you again for spending your time with us, and keep an eye on your inbox. I will be sending you guys a recording of this presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.